Welcome to the Lean Solutions Podcast, where we discuss business solutions to help listeners develop and implement action plans for true lean process improvement. I am your host, Patrick Adams. Hello and welcome to the Lean Solutions Podcast. My guest today is David Larsen. David is a certified planning and scheduling professional, certified project management professional, Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, content creator, public speaker, writer, and subject matter expert with more than 20 years of experience with projects, process improvement, data analytics, and facilitation across industries including government, manufacturing, healthcare, human resources, and finance. We have a lot to talk about. Welcome to the show, David.
It's a pleasure to be with you here today. Thank you so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, you and I, David, we met at the Lean Six Sigma World Conference down in Orlando not too long ago. And
yes, indeed.
It was great to meet you in person and have some great conversation. Obviously, you were a speaker there. I was a speaker there. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But you actually live in Florida. Is that correct?
I do. I feel like I live in paradise every day. I grew up in Florida on the Gulf Coast, moved away to Georgia and South Carolina for a good number of years. Within the last 3 years, had the opportunity to move back closer to home to not exactly the same hometown, a little bit farther south, Port Charlotte, Florida. So yeah, it was fun for that conference. Brought my family along, went to Orlando, so enjoyed the conference, and then had some quality family time on the back end of that.
Nice. Now, did you have any of the hurricane damage when the hurricane came through recently, or?
Yeah, unfortunately, we did, like so many others, there in Port Charlotte where we're at. We lost our roof. We're currently not living in our home. It's I can be a natural Eeyore, so I choose to put forward the energy and look at the positive. My entire family's healthy and fine and safe. We chose to evacuate and follow those recommendations. So it's been an exercise in resiliency, going through all that fun stuff, and it may lead to some content. I may have a book in me, and maybe it's based on some of our experiences like this. It's I don't recommend it for anybody to have to experience, but there's everything's good with the family, and it's just stuff, right, at the end of the day.
That's right. Yeah, focusing on the healthy family and making sure, obviously
100%.
that's huge.
Yeah.
So, well, I'm sorry to hear that about the home and obviously your current situation. But, obviously, glad that you and I met and were able to get to know each other a little bit better. And obviously, you're now here on the Lean Solutions Podcast. So I'm excited to share with our listeners a little bit more about your background, some of the things that you've experienced, and also loved your presentation in Orlando. So I want to talk a little bit about that as well. But for those that are listening in, can you share just a little bit about your professional journey and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I look at myself as a quality professional, specializing in process improvement and operational excellence. I started out my journey about 22 years ago as a process engineer at a government managed facility. I pursued development opportunities, achieved those, right certifications through the years. It changed my trajectory from being that process engineer into project management. And then I had the opportunity to change industries, changing away from project management and getting myself into manufacturing, back into process and quality engineering. And it was within that manufacturing chapter of my life that I saw another skill set, that Lean and Six Sigma skill set that I didn't see prior to getting in manufacturing. I probably saw glimmers of it, but not in that packaging. So I was able to achieve my black belt, and then gaining that opened doors to be able to transition from manufacturing. And I had the opportunity to serve within the healthcare system in Southwest Florida. That's what allowed my family and I to move away from great friends in South Carolina and Georgia to come back to be closer to family. And while I was within healthcare for a little bit, I wanted to continue learning because that's something that's valuable to me. And then so I pursued a master black belt. I've pursued that through Florida Atlantic University.
Very nice. Well, that's a pretty significant background, and as I mentioned in your bio, many different industries that you've worked in even since then, including government and manufacturing, which you mentioned, but also healthcare, human resources, finance. So lots of experiences, I'm sure, and I'm excited for some of our listeners to hear, some of the things that you are involved with. When it comes to your career in manufacturing, I guess specifically, anything stick out as far as like a challenge that you had when it came to continuous improvement, something specifically? And I guess it doesn't have to be in manufacturing; it could be in anywhere that you've worked before, but just a challenge that you came across. Maybe could even be maybe one of the projects that you worked on or something like that. Anything at all come to mind?
Let's touch on manufacturing. Sure. So, sure. A challenge is, we've tried that before, right? That it doesn't apply to, that kind of process, that kind of methodology, that kind of improvement thinking doesn't apply to maybe a testing or a laboratory environment. So, I can think back to a mentoring, coaching a yellow belt through their certification project. And that person, right? That person was within the lab environment. She was seeking the recognition as a yellow belt. And the approach that she took with the naysayer co-workers and team members, and she just pushed through it. She didn't let the naysayers, talk down and discourage. It was fun to be a thought partner to her during that effort, and it was fun to see her through the project win them over. And so it was one project, and then getting through it, she was already thinking on to the next one, and having those new naysayers that were no longer naysayers on her side, and looking at, hey, some of these standards that we have in place could use a refresh. Hey, I'll lead the charge, but who's with me on doing this refresh? So it's winning those over. That was the kind of the challenge. Having that encouraged person excited to learn and engage in a positive manner. Thinking back on that project again, that project was used for the following year. That facility went through a OSHA VPP recertification, and that was one of the featured projects of frontline team member led projects, and that was well received by the recertification team.
Oh, that's amazing. So what would you say, just to dig in a little bit further on that, what would you say, like, were her techniques for winning that group over? Because I know there's a lot of listeners right now that are probably in the same boat or have been in the same boat, where they have those naysayers, that are part of a project team, or, maybe working in the same area as them. And they're trying to, to promote a continuous improvement culture or work on active problem solving. And you have these people around them maybe that are negative, or, maybe, oh, we already tried that stuff, or we, whatever it may be. And so I would be curious to know what would be some of the maybe techniques or some of the different things that she used in particular to help win them over.
I think when she came to me with the concept as a coach, I think what helped her win over her team was the data collection process. So in concept, the project was a safety response to an event within the laboratory.
Okay.
So there really wasn't any data. So we needed to gather some. And, it was fun to be that early on coach, and it was fun to ask her those questions. I don't recall giving her anything but grief and questions, and if I tried not to frustrate her, but she saw what I was doing. She saw that, hey, this is my project.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's yours. I want to encourage you. I want to be that encourager for you. So where we didn't have data, how long does the current state for safety to respond when we have an event of that type? And so she said, hey, couldn't we do like a demonstration? Couldn't we do a drill? Yeah, go ask and coordinate. So then once she learned, hey, we can have a drill. Perfect. It's going to be a live drill demonstration. How might we collect it? How might we have timestamps? Hey, we could video record it. Absolutely, from start to finish. Let's video record. That's great. That gives us the current state, right? And it gives us the ways and means to review it. We can dig deeper. So when the concept of the problem was there, there was some of that resistance, right? But then as she started, engaging with me, asking questions, as she was learning, going through some of those learning modules, and because again, right, it's that problem solving framework. The tools are great, but it's how we approach that problem. And she had a great working relationship with her teammates in the lab. She was not in that leadership role or position, but she was just collaborative. She was pulling from those others. And after the drill, having that benchmark example of the current state and seeing, wow, okay, that took us 7 to 10 minutes to respond. If this was a real event and that person's in that situation, oh my, we couldn't find some of those rescue tools when we needed them. Why is that? Why did it take as long for safety and the response team to come? They didn't know where to park. Review that video. Oh my, how might we start closing those gaps? And that was the fun part. When people saw the pain points, it was now real for them. It was less of an abstract concept. That's the beauty of go and see, right? And so she embraced it. So that was kind of her approach. Is, I don't have those answers. How do I get those answers? And that approach of let's do that drill, let's do that demonstration. I hope to give those readers some of that inspiration in that way. I hope that helps.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, what you're talking about is, shows ultimate respect for the people that were around her, right? Because, some change agents can, go out there and just try to use brute force to just push through and push people over in the process. And at the end of the day, is that really sustainable? Right.
I agree with that. Yeah. Is it?
Probably not. Right. So,
right.
Her approach was to involve the people that are at the Gemba and by asking questions, by involving them in the process. And again, that shows true respect for them, and it engages them so that the solution isn't just hers, it's everyone's. And now you also have buy-in. Right. And so
exactly right.
That's where the long-term sustainment comes from.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, okay. So, love it. Great example. I appreciate you sharing that. Let's transition over to your current job. Tell us a little bit about your day job. What, if we were to jump in David's shoes for the day and follow you around, I mean, what would that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my day job, I'm the trusted internal consultant for AAA, the Auto Club Group. Specifically, I'm working within human resources, building that continuous improvement culture, working on projects. I'm a part of an army of 2 people, myself and my immediate leader. So it's really fun. I think it's fun to bring this concept, this process thinking, this methodology of problem solving to great folks within human resources, that they know their business. I don't know theirs. I'm certainly learning a lot of those aspects of human resources. So on a typical day, I'm working with those specialists on the front line. I'm working within leaders, within the different centers of excellence, within the human resources function. I'm being that thought partner to help some of those leaders approach a problem that they want to solve with their team. So kind of being that soundboard to work through, to help them plan and craft that approach, to work with their team, that it's that team approach versus that maybe traditional management style of direct type of problem solving by the leader versus by the team solving. So having some of those great conversations, and then of course it's some of those projects that, as a continuous improvement team, that we're partnering with and we're helping facilitate those improvement projects with others, with an improvement team. So maybe doing a little of that project management aspect, as well as problem solving, and facilitating some conversations such as after action reviews. So it kind of runs the gamut of some of those improvement projects, maybe some automation tool and solutioning, where ideally we might look for some IT resource and support. But if we're not high enough on a priority, how might we help those human resource team members? How might we help them do an automation outside of the IT resource while we wait on that resource alignment, if that makes sense?
The most dangerous phrase in our language is "we've always done it this way."
There are an awful lot of posers out there. People that do lean because they're mandated to do it. They think it will work.
How stable are you today? What are your goals? Are you generating small, simple improvements?
There are very few people that embrace lean with their full heart, head, and emotion.
Let's imagine that your current output is top-notch. Is that enough to stop innovating and stop reaching for more?
Patrick's book uncovers the essence of what those organizations look like and what the posers look like. Caution, are you in the fake zone or the real zone?
Order your copy today at avoidcontinuousappearance.com. Absolutely, yes, it does. And I have to imagine that what you're doing now is quite a bit different than what you were doing in manufacturing. Are you having to adjust your approach, or be flexible with the tools that you have on your Lean Six Sigma tool belt? Or are you finding that everything fits perfectly? Can you talk to us a little bit about just the differences between the two, and what you've had to do to kind of adjust to kind of the back office administrative side of things in comparison to being in manufacturing?
Yeah, absolutely. No, for those that might be watching this video replay later, right? I'm smiling because it's a great question. So, the tools within the tool belt, while different, maybe approach wise, but process is process, right? And, transitioning from manufacturing into healthcare and now within human resources, for me, it was initially harder coming straight out of manufacturing. But it's remembering that it's a storytelling process. And, a quote that I've heard come from the pulpit and from others: nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. I'm a different engineer. I care a little bit more with my heart, and leading with that harmony approach, right? We have to problem solve through it. So for me, what helped me do a better performance within human resources was that first pit stop in healthcare, to bring me out of that I'm a process engineer, I have to solve this problem by myself. Wait a second. No, I'm just that facilitator. I have a different way of thinking maybe than some of my folks that I'm supporting and consulting with. How might I better speak their language, not my own? Because if I speak their language, not use Lean and Six Sigma terminology, but say it in a way that it's gonna grasp and resonate first. So one of my favorite things to do when I start an improvement project, now especially within human resources, let's see the process first. The team knows how to do the work, right? But let's break it down. Let's start with that customer focus. Hey, okay, who are we handing things off to? Where are we getting information from? I like to use that SIPOC approach, right? Supplier, input, process, output, and customers. I like to start kind of with the customers and work backwards. Because right among us practitioners, that customer focus, voice of customer makes sense, right? But maybe to someone else it might not. But ultimately, right, we want to make sure the work that we're doing is valuable. Have that handoff to customer and work backwards. Where are we getting our inputs? It might be from systems internal, might be electronic inputs. It may be from an email. Where's that coming from? And just kind of piece it all out together. So a lot of times I'm having these conversations and I'm using maybe Word, or I might maybe using Excel, or I might be using something within Teams to kind of whiteboard. So I'm collecting that information and making sure the persons that are being heard, right? Because that's, we as people want to be heard. So I want to capture all that information, and I might take and create that SIPOC as a draft offline. And then the next working session, come back and say, hey, remember that great conversation? Kind of show them that whiteboard that we might have created, and then show them that product. Here's that high level process map. Here's what I heard, right? What did I get right? What did I miss? And let them react to it. And the reactions are great, but like, wow, I didn't think about it that way. Home run, right? Help them to see it from that stepwise approach. Where's the information coming from? What am I doing with it? Where does it get delivered or handed off to? Why are we doing it? So that's kind of some of the stuff, the tools, like to me, right? It's industry agnostic. It's just making it relatable, right? I like to talk about other things, maybe not necessarily work, because hey, we all are doing that day job. I like to eat, right? We'll get into that maybe later, but I like to use Chick-fil-A as an example. Because Chick-fil-A is something like, hey, who's eating at Chick-fil-A? That resonates with a lot of folks in my audiences, and I'm like, okay, great, that resonates. Let's pull that thread. Hey, what do you experience when you go there? How many different locations do you visit? Oh, you visit more than one. Perfect. And you start connecting some of those dots of foundations, right? Lean foundations, consistency. How do you get to a foundation without standards and things like that? So it's among friends, it's that Jedi mind trick of leading them, getting them to see, right? So I may have rambled on a little bit longer, but I'm trying to circle back to, does it connect from manufacturing to others? I would argue that I think it's so. I think it does.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I love what you said about pulling the thread and connecting with the audience. Definitely powerful techniques for anyone that's listening in, that's facilitating teams or training, coaching, anything like that. So thanks for that. Let's talk about the Lean Six Sigma World Conference in Orlando that you and I met at. So why was that? And was that something that you had done before? Do you speak often? Was this the first time? I mean, what made you want to speak at the conference itself?
I wanted to make myself feel uncomfortable.
There we go. I like it.
This was my first time speaking at a like-minded practitioner professional conference. Many years ago, different industry. It was more of a little bit of a technical presentation. I did present previously, but we're talking 15 plus years ago.
Sure.
So I'm going to call this reset the clock. This was first time presenting, live audience. I but I wanted to, I wanted to challenge myself, and I felt like I had a good message. And, I threw out that proposal, submit an abstract. I was excited to have a conference kind of within my backyard. The Lean Six Sigma World Conference was held in Orlando this year. I learned maybe not always in Orlando. Hey, no problem. But this year it was. And so, yeah, I wanted to make myself uncomfortable. I wanted to grow for myself, right? Before you press that record button, I tease myself because I can make fun of myself. I'm not going to offend me. I think I have something between my ears, but I think I process a little slow. And I like to listen when I'm in a meeting. I've challenged myself to be a little bit more vocal in the right opportunities when I'm in a room full of folks. But famously, I like to sit and listen. And if I have a question, famously, it's after the meeting. I'm going to make a phone call. I'm going to follow up, maybe send a note and say, hey, something, in reflection, I had some thinking. And so with that mindset, I wanted to have some gymnastics, exercise my mind a little bit, and have that speaking opportunity. And for me, the conference really was a great experience. Yeah. I wish I might have had some closer friends in the audience to say, hey, would you record me so I can critique myself? Because I'm that kind of a guy. Sure. I made some friends, but I didn't feel comfortable asking that request. So maybe next time. But it was great from that networking. It was great from meeting folks like yourself, getting the chance to shake a hand. Because I did try to reach out ahead of the conference and start to initiate some of that networking a little bit, just to look forward to the conference. So for me, it really was a great exercise. And anyone who has not found a speaking opportunity or found a why, I just want to encourage and pose that challenge of, when's the last time you spoke in person? If not, develop that story, develop that content to be able to speak about. You may be uncomfortable in the moment, but growth can happen in those uncomfortable moments. I know it felt that way for me. So I felt like I got more than what I could have ever imagined coming out of that conference. Mm-hmm. And really, I want to give a shout out to Katie Anderson too, because I watched a webinar of hers recently, and it was creating some intentional space for thinking when having a conversation. It made sense to me, and I just never heard that framing of it. So I think I'm going to be a little bit more kind to myself and stop saying I'm a slow processor. No, I just need some space to think. Give me a moment. Right. And then try to practice that a little bit better. But, like I said, it's easy to run over myself with a bus. I won't do that to others, but I will do it to me. I'm hard on myself.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes that to an extent, it can help, you have this internal drive yourself to be better. Right. So that can be a positive thing. So, don't be too hard on yourself though. I thought you did an amazing job, and you were also part of a panel discussion, which was super powerful. What can you just share with some of our listeners, maybe a little bit about what you talked about, what some of your topics were that you presented on?
Absolutely. So let's start with the panel discussion first. So, that was a fun opportunity. Myself and 3 other panelists, and it was led by a moderator facilitator that was talking about best practices as practitioners for coaching, leading project teams through a virtual environment, right? That's something that's, maybe still challenging for some, or maybe it's become a norm or partway norm for some. Mm-hmm. So a lot of good conversation generated from that panel conversation with the audience. And then my presentation that was accepted was around deploying continuous improvement and Lean Six Sigma within the human resources realm. And, that was kind of a case study, kind of came from that first person approach from within AAA. And it was fun to have an audience resonate with some of that content. I was a little nervous about leaving that Q&A open at the end. I saw some others use all of their time, and no time left for questions. Darn, catch me after the meeting, right? And I'm like, ooh, I don't know how I want to play that. So as a speaker, it was great to have live questions. It was, again, for me, it was encouraging that I was able to think in the moment. One question I felt I wanted to answer it, and I wanted to answer it thoroughly. So I tabled that one. Hey, let's talk about that topic after this meeting. Let's take a couple of other maybe brief answer type of questions. It worked out. So for me, right, I was experimenting with the audience a little bit, learning, and it was a good time. So yeah, those two topics on virtual environment best practices, what works for those panelists, and then deploying Lean and Six Sigma within an HR environment.
Yeah. So out of those two topics, maybe the panel discussion, and it could be something that you talked about or someone else talked about, any best practices or ahas or something that was discussed during that panel discussion that you were like, ooh, that's a good nugget. That's something that maybe others should take away or hear about. Obviously, everyone listening in wasn't at the World Conference or doesn't have access to the audio from that. So do you have one that you could share? And maybe it's one from the panel or one from your presentation, either one.
I think something that resonates with me from the panel was managing knowledge, right? How to keep momentum from meeting or working session to working session, building that momentum. How are you tracking decisions? Are you attaching documents, artifacts to email, trading that? How to better manage that knowledge related to that project, to that effort. So I think there was some great conversations around managing knowledge, right? Using Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, or internal file management. Having a central knowledge managing location was something that came up in the panel as hey, this is a best practice. Don't send your team, don't try to manage your team through attachments to emails because is it the latest? Is it the best? Hey, I was looking at this email dated bump, not this one. Okay, let's have a central knowledge management location for the project, for the effort. Everybody works off the same sheet of music, so to say, and that way you get some of that consistency. How do you, it's a little bit more, preference to organization on how to mark those decisions or track those schedules. Myself, I like to use that A3 storytelling process because it lets you kind of summarize succinctly. And if you need to dive into the details, you can always point to those detail containing artifacts. But A3 report, works to kind of summarize and mark moments of decisions throughout that problem solving project. So yeah, it was good.
Love it. Yeah, no, it was a really good discussion. Good little tidbit there that you shared. Appreciate that, and even dropped a couple software applications or platforms that that individuals can look into, as they're working in the virtual world. So you're in the HR industry or in HR world. What do you think sets your work or your approach maybe apart from others in your field? Anything specifically that you would say it kind of sets you apart, or again, your approach?
For me, what I think it's being approachable and relatable. When I get the chance to work with you, I want to work alongside of you. I want to invite you into the world of improvement. You see an opportunity, you kind of raised your hand and say, hey, I'm a leader, or I'm a frontline worker. I have this problem. Perfect. You have a pain point and you're raising your hand for a little bit of help. I want to meet you where you're at. Mm-hmm. I don't always see practitioners, taking that approach. For me, it's that being people focused, being that servant leader, and keeping it relatable and approachable, right? Let's forget about work for a moment. Let's talk about Chick-fil-A. Let's talk about, something else. Let's talk about going to the hardware store, going to, there's so many of those things that I try to keep an eye open for, right? Earlier this year, we went to an amusement park, local here within Florida. No, I won't say names, right? But I'm pointing out to my kiddos, hey, look at those floor markings, look at those signs. I'm nerding and geeking out, but I'm trying to have fun with it. And so I made sure to have some pictures, because I'm like, ooh, I could use these when I'm then in the next team kickoff back at work. And just like, hey, who's been to a theme park near you? I know for many of my coworkers, it's they go to Cedar Point and things like that. So it's like, okay, perfect. It'll resonate. So for me, it's keeping it relatable and approachable, that whether you realize it or not, there's stuff within your day-to-day life, at home, outside of home, even before we get to work. So if it works there, might it work here? You decide. Yeah, I'd like to think it does. So it's that approach that for me and others within my circle, I think it works. And that's what I think, kind of sets us apart. And I enjoy it that way.
Love it. Love it. I would say my favorite theme park all time is Universal Studios, hands down, for me personally and my family. But when I go with you, I'm always like, they do it right. I mean, we could probably we could do a whole nother episode on lean techniques that you see in at Universal Studios. So we'll save that for another time. But
please, I'd love to geek out with you on that. That'd be fun.
Yeah. So last question I have for you. Obviously, we've heard a lot about your background. We've heard a lot about your current day job and what you do and kind of your approach. You mentioned earlier about some of the challenges, personal challenges with what happened with the hurricane in your home, but that you're optimistic, that you keep yourself focused on the positive during some of those tough times and things that go on in your life personally. But I would say the question that I have is, what brings you joy? What at the end of the day, what would you say it is that brings David Larsen joy?
Yeah. It's family. It's some outdoor activities. It's fishing, hunting. And right there with family is cooking. I can tell you I love you, but let me show you I love you by cooking with food, because that secret ingredient is love every time, right? So I like to think, and I'm not biased, because I have those sources. I have my beautiful bride and my two kiddos, my daughter and my son, that tell me that I might bake better than I cook. So I, as an engineer, as that quality specialist, I enjoy expressing myself through cooking. Food has to look good as well as taste good. So I'm trying to hit all of your senses.
Wow.
I'm very opinionated with my preferences when it comes to food. For instance, right? I believe in apple pie. No additions, such as raisins or walnuts. It's in the name. It's apple pie. I believe smoked pork should be pulled, not chopped or sliced. Brownies are meant to be fudgy, not cakey or laced with nuts. I could go on, and I'm sure I might polarize some people here, but I enjoy cooking for friends and family, for sure.
Love it. Well, next time I'm down in Florida, I'm going to hold you to that. Then we're going to have to
love that.
Get together, and I'd love to have you cook. That'd be amazing.
My pleasure.
David, it's been great to have you on the show. Again, maybe we'll come back on and talk specifically theme parks next time.
That'd be a blast. That really would.
But it's been great to have you on. Really appreciate everything that you're doing for your field from a continuous improvement perspective. And if anyone has any questions, about the podcast today, or maybe even about the presentation that you gave at the Lean Six Sigma World Conference, where would be the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, best place is on LinkedIn. I'd like to think I'm active there, and reach out, send me a quick note. We can connect, and I like to think I keep an open door. So yeah, please find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. And as always, we will drop your LinkedIn profile, a link to that in the show notes. So anyone that's listening in that wants to connect with David, you can go right to the show notes and find a link directly to his LinkedIn page, connect with him, and hopefully ask some questions, and who knows, maybe even get invited over for dinner sometime. David, it's great. Have an amazing week, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Patrick.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of the Lean Solutions Podcast. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe. This way you'll get updates as new episodes become available. If you feel so inclined, please give us a review. Thank you so much.